Welcome back, Beans Army, to another episode of the Less is More Sports Podcast, the college off-season podcast, where you could say we're less of the regular season, but more of the off-season. Followers of the show know that usually after our patented cap or no cap episodes, we like to do like a player draft of some sort. But the player draft that we have planned post the 2024 cap or no cap for the college football season involves me and Ryan. And without Ryan on the show this week, um, Matt and I decided to do a filler episode on our own little topic and a big topic that hit, a big topic that hit the sports world this week. An absolute legend, if we might as well add, Tavon Austin. Most of you all remember his legendary career at West Virginia, but a lot of us remember Tavon Austin as an absolute legend when it comes to highlight tapes. And so, what Matt and I are going to do today is we're just going to reminisce about old highlight tapes. I hope you all sit back, enjoy, and let's just talk about our favorite highlight tapes we've watched over the years as sports fans. Because you know what? Sports are a great way that bring people together, and we want you all to enjoy the same things that we enjoy, and even other things. Did I word that right? Kind of feel like I had a word vomit. I haven't led the show in a
You
while.
know,
So.
I mean, that made sense. That made sense.
Okay, good. I don't know if it sounded weird. I'm kind of trying to shake off the rust here. I haven't led the show in a couple weeks. Matt's been holding it down, leading the show, given the
It's not
things
easy, but
planned.
it's a challenge.
I know one thing's for sure is like he has enjoyed not hearing we're less of the regular season, but more of the off season. I know
It
he's
has
enjoyed that.
it has been nice. Yes, it has.
So Matt, I'm going to turn over to you because you have some questions you want answered today. So you are now in charge for the rest of the show.
Yeah. So Les told me we were doing stuff about mixtapes, and I thought a mixtape was just something you were doing when you were trying to strike a chord, and it was probably a minor. So
Oh, he went there. He
one of
went
our
there.
most popular segments. I have to bring it back, but yeah, I have no idea what Les was talking about when he was talking about these mixtapes. Because to me, a mixtape is something that a rapper or a musician puts out.
Matt
Or
thought I was talking about mixtape Wayne over here. Hey,
yeah,
mixtape
well,
Wayne is legendary. Do not play.
I'm about to say, knowing your love of Little Wayne, that's not surprising at all that you would say that. But no, I was not, to be fully honest, I wasn't a sports guy until I was well into middle school. I had no idea what was going on in sports. And even then, I was just like, I'll watch the NFL and I'll watch IU basketball. So these mixtapes Les was talking about were like very foreign to me. I kind of got what he was getting at, but to me, they were just like highlight reels. So, Les, why don't you give us a little history or a rundown of what the athletic, I guess, if you want to call it, mixtape is, maybe how it got started, the first big one, because you're the expert on this. I'm just here kind of for the ride. So,
Well,
without further ado,
really since the dawn of the social media era, highlight tapes have been a great way to give players exposure, kind of like without having to attend games and like watching full games. You get like a shortened clip of some of the best attributes that a player brings to the game. And as far as like when they really started blowing up, if you missed the ball is life era, you missed out because that was insane. That was some of the best collection of mixtapes, highlight reels, whatever you want to call them, in the especially recruiting industry. Because I'm the quote unquote recruiting expert on the show. The ball is life era was legendary, dude. You had like the John Wall mixtapes, you had the Austin Rivers mixtapes, and I think their reign of dominance from like 2011 to like 2018 is kind of, if we put into like music terms, that's like Wayne's mixtape run from like the early 2000s to the 2010s. I mean, if we had to compare the two, but no, highlights have always been a great way to give players exposure. I know a guy that you and I both know really well, D Stanton, Dead Stock Visuals.
yeah,
That's what he does a lot of now, and he does a great job. I run into him still at sporting events, and he does, and the exposure that he gives some of these local hoopers is just phenomenal. Much love to D Stanton, much love to Dead Stock Visuals. I want to get that out of the way, but I hope that answers your question.
it does. Because, I assume that like every big player has their own highlight reel, or every big recruit does. So, it's interesting though. I guess this was just one of those things that came along in the YouTube era where instead of having to be like, I once heard that this guy blocked 28 shots in a row, it's just like, here's highlights of him doing that versus like Gino Hills or something like that. So, I did miss out on that, but I do think it's very interesting. So, watching highlight reels, but what really surprised me about Tavon Austin when it comes to highlight reels is that he was a football guy. And usually when I think of like these sizzle reels, these highlight reels, like you said, I think of like John Wall or your beloved Cooper Flag or somebody like that. And I don't really think about football. So how many like notable football mixtapes have there been? Has there
Oh,
been
quite a
one?
few. I mean, I still watch Vince Young's highlight tape from college all the time, hence the name of my show of the show.
Yeah,
Like,
but that's college. Like, I guess that's true.
well, I mean, yeah, I feel like in football highlights are more popular at the college level than at the high school level. Because high
Right.
school football is so much harder to like judge a player than basketball because
Right.
there's so many different factors. You don't know the competition that they're playing. You don't know like, how the system that they're in could be very favorable to their skill sets versus college and having to change and all that stuff. So I mean, I feel like football at the highlight level isn't as popular as basketball, but
Right.
when you get to college and you play against like the best of the best at that level, that's when your highlight tapes really start um really taking off because in football, your tapes are more for recruiting purposes only, and the best of the best usually is seen by college
Mhm.
coaches that know what they're looking for. Whereas like basketball, I think is just more catered to be enjoyable for the everyday fan as well. I mean, they're used in
Right.
recruiting as well. Don't get me wrong. Don't want to misquote that at all. But yeah, I think basketball highlights are more tailor made for everyday fan enjoyment.
That does make a lot of sense because, like you said, and I think we'll hint on this a little bit later as we go along, is like how hard it is to tell excuse me, who is going to pan out at the next level, whether it be college or, as we're going to talk about in the case of Tavon Austin, professional. It's always kind of a crapshoot. So, yeah, I did think it was interesting though that like you said that most football were college players because I did see a few of those. There are a few YouTube channels devoted to like those great college players and their highlights. But for basketball, it's like a middle and high school thing. So I guess this warrants a question I don't think you're prepared for, but I feel like you'd have a really good take on, which is, do you think that age difference from when these mixtapes starts affects the psyche of players? Because
Oh,
when
absolutely.
because like basketball, when you're starting out at like the AAU level, and somebody's making like a hype video of you at like age 10, as opposed to like, oh, I was a 22-year-old playing in like playing college football. How do you think that affects like the player standpoint of it,
You know, you
comparing the two?
you say you didn't think I might have been prepared, but I actually have the perfect answer for this in my notes.
Okay,
And
good.
yes, and this brings me back to a point that I think a lot of sports fans remember that Austin Rivers made a couple years ago, and how highlight culture has a lot of ways changed basketball, and maybe not always for the better. I want to say it ruined basketball because basketball is still basketball at the end of the day. It's still the sport that I love the most, if we're being completely
Right,
honest.
me too.
But like much to his point, when he was coming up through the high school circuits, you had to be good to get a highlight reel. Now you get these like fifth graders, and don't get me wrong, they're great fifth graders. Don't I'm not throwing shade at anybody here. But now it's like everybody gets a highlight reel now. And it kind of defeats the purpose of what it meant back in that ball is life era, which made it so popular to begin with, because you had to be among either the best of the best or the most exciting of the most exciting just to get a tape in the first place. But now that everyone's gotten it, it's kind of watered down. And then the
Right,
fact that a lot of these kids like grow up watching these highlights is that they play to cater towards the highlights, and that they miss out on fundamental skills that make them better basketball players.
right. Whereas football, it's a team sport more so. So you're more focused on like making the quarterback look good, making the team look good. I totally get that. Yeah. I agree with your point there too, Les, because what was it I saw the other day? There was a highlight reel of first and third graders, and I'm like, what are we doing, people? Like these kids can't even read yet, and we're already putting their highlight. Well, they can't
Okay,
read.
if you can't read by
They
first or
can
third grade,
read.
your education system has failed you.
I don't know. There are a lot of bad education systems out there,
That's true. That's true.
But still, these kids can have only been reading for like a year and a half, and we're already like, "Welcome to YouTube. Everyone's watching you play basketball. Have fun with it." So, yeah, I think that's you made a very good point there with that because it is just amazing to see, especially with basketball. How much further down we push like the acceptable well, not only highlight reel, but offering a scholarship to
Right.
a kid type levels. I mean, it's really impressive.
Yeah, I
So
remember not to, before we continue, that just made
go
me
ahead,
think
yeah.
of I remember when it was like a big deal when Billy Gillespie here locally offered like an eighth grader a scholarship, but honestly, that's not as uncommon as you think because when I got to attend my very first Duke game as a graduation present from graduating IU Southeast, um, we ran into a couple people that were around the Duke program, obviously, and they even said that Coach K started recruiting Marvin Bagley by the time he was in eighth grade.
I
And
can believe that.
yeah, well, of course, I look at who Marvin Bagley was, and I'm sure he already looked the part at eighth grade. I mean, if we're being honest, like he just had D1 player written all over him. But yeah, I think I remember that being a big deal. But now in today's culture, it's like you got to get them younger and younger. Pause, not to make a weird comment there, but um,
I already did that.
try to strike a chord, but it's really A minor. But um, no, but yeah, it's like it's especially in basketball because like you see it now even through the draft process how like players that are 2 and 3 years in college don't go as high because because they're not as young and they have even more mileage on them before they even start their NBA careers than like maybe a one and done player. But
Right.
no, I still think to a certain extent. And what's even crazier, following the recruiting that I do is that they have player rankings for elementary school kids now. And I
Which,
think
yeah,
that's absolutely ridiculous. That I mean,
no.
if you I think the minimum age you should start ranking players is freshman in high school. It's my personal opinion. I
I would
know
agree.
like if you want to start training like in middle school whatever for this level of dedication to the game, sure. But at that age it's like you're a child. Like be a child. Like you don't
Have
need to
fun.
understand the business side of this yet. Like just enjoy it while it's still at its purest form.
You do not need a shoe deal. No, not at that level.
You do not need a shooting coach when you're in third grade. I'm sorry.
You just put a bunch of shooting coaches out of business, Les. I hope you're happy with yourself.
Hey, maybe I did. Maybe we'll finally get the fact as a society to let kids be kids. I don't know.
We might, but I don't have much faith in us at that point, to
No,
be
I
honest
don't.
with
No,
you.
not especially not in this industry. Before we
No,
veer
not in the
off
sports
into
industry.
another topic that goes beyond the show.
Oh man, that would be really. Yeah, we
There's
don't
a
want to
couple
get.
things you said. I was about to like pop off on some opinions, and people would be like, "Oh, that's not less is more sports," and I was like, maybe,
What
maybe.
is going on? This bye week has turned
This is
into a
not
political.
we come for Bean and we stay for the sports takes. That's it.
This is not anything like that. No.
Bean
But
and
yeah, Bean heard his name.
Bean heard his name and now he's on. Bean just got back from the vet today.
Bean's gonna have clean teeth.
Bean is going to have clean teeth. Yeah, I didn't know
Clean
they had
teeth.
to
Bean.
draw. I didn't know they had to draw blood to like see if they could put dog, which makes sense, I guess. See if your blood is or if body type's compatible for being put anesthesia. I didn't even know they had to put dogs to sleep to clean their teeth.
I've heard it depends on the dog, really. If
Mm-hmm.
you've got that dog in you, they have to put like you. They have to put you down too. I should know.
If you
That is
got
that's
that,
my wisdom teeth out.
I'll fuck with that heavy. If you got that dog
They
in
didn't
you.
do that when I had my wisdom teeth out. But back to the topic at hand.
I just want to point out that I stayed awake when my wisdom teeth were taken out. Because I honestly, but people are like, "Oh, you're a badass," blah blah blah. I'm like, no, I just have a deathly fear of being put under. So honestly,
Really?
it's the opposite of being a badass.
Huh? No, I was like, I need to not know what's going on. I don't care if I wake up in an alleyway. I'll be okay.
I full on had like I say this very very loosely, man. I full on had like conversations with the people who are taking my wisdom teeth out.
Oh
And
my
of course,
god.
I say that loosely because your mouth's like wide open. You're just
You're full of dog. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I did that when I woke up, and apparently I just ranted about Frankenstein, the
I
book.
why do I not why do I not doubt that in the slightest?
It was so weird, man. It was so weird. But you know who probably also had like their wisdom teeth taken out with no anesthetic?
Who?
Tavon Austin.
Probably. Tavon Austin was a badass and still one
So
of the most exciting college players of all time. And honestly, and I know I said this in the group chat, and I know you and Ryan kind of had some different opinions on this, but I feel like Tavon Austin came into the wrong era in the NFL. I feel like if he came into now's NFL game, he would have been a star.
I would agree, yeah, because I'll never forget the one huge game he had as an in the NFL was, of course, a game against Indianapolis where the Colts just got absolutely boat raced in that 38-8 game back in 2013, I think. And he
Hmm.
had what, a 95-yard punt return and two like 80-yard touchdown passes from Kellen freaking Clemens.
Yes.
And it was just like, whoa. So I did some research on those St. Louis, we weren't in LA yet, Rams teams. And I did not realize this until I saw it, that one of his teammates in the wide receiving core was Stedman Bailey.
Yep.
And it's
Stedman
just like,
Bailey and Tavon Austin were teammates in the NFL.
and then I was looking at the rest of that roster, and it's like, there is no better roster to get to what we were talking earlier that shows how hard it is to actually figure out if a guy is going to pan out in the NFL than like this Rams team was, because not only did you have Tavon Austin and Stedman Bailey, just two absolute god tier studs when they were at the University of West Virginia, you also had James Laurinaitis, who I thought was going to be like the next, oh, I don't know, the next, I don't want to say Lawrence Taylor because that's like very cliche,
Brian,
but
say
even I
Brian
thought he was,
Brian Urlacher.
yeah, next Brian Urlacher type when he was at Ohio State. And then his career kind of fizzled out too, and I could not believe it. I thought for sure that guy was going to be great. And then I looked at the rest of that roster. You got Jack Rabbit Jenkins, a guy who had a long career but never really seemed to hit the highs that I thought he was capable of. Is he still in the league? I think he may still
Are you
be
talking
in
about
the league.
Janoris Jenkins?
Janoris Jenkins, yeah.
Yeah, I never. I'm gonna be honest. I was not familiar with the Jack Rabbit Jenkins name. I was not familiar with that. I always called him Janoris Jenkins. No, I think he is
Oh,
retired now. I'm gonna Google this real quick.
we're gonna Google this while I continue to talk about it. And I mean Robert Quinn, who was really good for a couple years, and
Oh yeah,
that
Robert,
whole,
dude. As a Duke fan, I know all about how good Robert Quinn was in college.
and then there were all those guys back in like that whole 2008 draft with like Leotis McKelvin, Chris Long, Jake Long, where those were all guys who I thought were going to be like absolute world beating type players who just kind of all had varying degrees of success but didn't have the careers I thought they would. I mean, it's impossible really to tell who's going to be the most successful NFL players from the college level, even with all those highlight reels. And
So
that's still true
Jackrabbit
today.
Jenkins has not been on. He's not retired, but he has not been on a team in 2 years. He's still a
Oh,
free agent.
okay, well, there's a chance he could be a Colt. I don't know. Chris Ballard loves his weird free agent signings. So you're saying there's a
You're
chance, is what
saying
I.
there's a chance. Yep.
But it is impressive just to see like how hard it is for like guys who you think are going to be home runs to actually like make it in the NFL. 'Cause even after they have like a stellar college career, guys who they're not busts. We're not talking about like Achilles Smith or anything like that. Not at all. But who are still like what's the word I'm looking for? Serviceable, but you thought they would be more than serviceable.
Hmm.
And
Are
like
you are you,
he's one of
are you
those.
asking me?
No, I'm just saying.
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah.
But I'm gonna ask you now if there are any other players besides who we've been talking about in Tavon Austin, where you thought that they were going to be like the greatest thing when they left the college ranks. We'll start with the NFL.
Start with the
And then,
NFL. Dude,
yeah,
and he had kind of like to your point, this dude has not been bad by any stretch of the imagination, but I thought he would be one of the best ever at his position. And I'm talking about Jadeveon Clowney. When he was in South Carolina, of course, everyone remembers that hit against Michigan. The hit heard around the world.
where he
I mean,
knocks the helmet off.
a lot of people argue that that was what made him the number one overall pick, but people forget that he set like SEC records in like 2 years. And that's how good this dude was. Not to mention, he was a number one rated recruit coming out of high school. Fun fact: when I was in high school, the track coach was one of my math teachers, and during spring break, they go compete in this event in South Carolina. And Jadeveon Clowney, keep in mind you, at that time, 6'6", 270, is running against other track stars and posting like sub 11-second 100-meter
Good
dashes.
lord. Right.
Like that's insane. Like, and he just was raving about this because he was trying to make a pitch to get some of the football players to join the track team. But he was like, I look at he was like, Jadeveon Clowney, number one ranked player in the country, 6'6", 270, defensive lineman, is running 100-meter dashes in
Yeah,
sub
and you guys
11
can't.
seconds. Like, that's NFL. He's like, that's NFL speed. That is unreal speed right there. And like you combine and just the size, the speed, the overall athleticism, the hit power behind each hit. Jadeveon Clowney, I thought would be a star in the NFL, and by no means has he been bad. And I know
No,
he
he's not
actually,
a
I
bust.
feel like, was a very underrated piece on the Ravens this year. But compared to what I thought he would be, compared to what how his career panned out, was nothing close. And then to top it off, he gets drafted to the Texans, and you're like, oh, you can't double him because you got J.J. Watt on the other side. So it's like I'm thinking he's about to have a freaking smorgasbord feast over there, dude.
Yeah. And then it just doesn't pan out that way because of J.J. Watt's injuries and the fact up until recently, Houston has been kind of one of those "what are they doing" franchises in the
Right.
NFL. Unfortunately, that's no longer the case, and it makes me sad.
Now, now
But
they're now they're like the best in the South right now, and everybody else is playing catch up.
and see, the one Ohio State quarterback finally actually worked as like a really good pro, and it had to be in the Colts division.
And I did call that too.
You
Of
did
course,
call that,
actually, no.
huh?
I mean, I said C.J. Stroud would be a good quarterback. I also was really high on Justin Fields, but that's still to be determined.
That's still to be determined too. Yeah, because apparently he's beating like Russell Wilson in home run derbies in Steelers camp. So do with that information what you will.
Right.
So yeah, for me, I was thinking about a guy who did this too. And for me, the one guy who immediately came to mind was Darren McFadden.
Yes.
I really thought when Darren McFadden went to the NFL, he was going to be like the next great running back who we were all terrified of, who ran all over your favorite team, et cetera, et cetera. And instead, he was really good, but he wasn't an all-time great. And it feels and it feels kind of dishonest to judge people against like being an all-time great. But, it just makes you wonder, what might have been. I mean, I don't think there was anything wrong with his motor. I don't think there was anything wrong with him as a player. I just don't think he fit in that NFL as well as I thought he was going to do. Because I mean, you can make the same argument about Reggie Bush, a
Yeah.
dude who with the Heisman trophies, with the championship pedigree, who I don't won titles at USC, was a very highly touted draft pick, and then he didn't have a bad career. He won a Super Bowl, was a long career, but it wasn't like he was the next Walter Payton or Emmitt
Hmm.
Smith or anybody like that. He was just a very serviceable running back. So, yeah, that was one that surprised me too. So, for me, I usually think of running backs when I think of dudes who had like incredibly long, okay careers, but that just didn't live up to the hype I was expecting. Yeah, I was expecting them
Right.
to because that's just how hard it is to adjust to the league.
I got a
Defenses can really.
player. I got a player. You and I will both agree that when we watched them in college, we thought they would probably be like a stud in the NFL. And by no means, like, they had some bright spots, but they at no point like put it all together and became like a consistent stud player. And that was Percy Harvin when he was at Florida.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, and part of that was those concussions, and part of that was the fact. Now that's a guy too who I think if he played today would
Hmm.
probably have a little bit more luck, even with the way they've changed kickoff returns, because he was just so fast and athletic
He
that
was
he
just so
would be
good with
like
the ball in his hands. Yeah,
he would just be a perfect like hybrid quarter, not even like a wildcat dude. You could put him in the slot, you could put him at running back, you could put him anywhere basically but tight end, and I think he would have had like a great career because he's
just
just
put the ball in his hands, Matt. Just put
and
the
then
ball
let
in
him
his
do what he
hands.
needs to do. Yeah, it's
And
incredible.
everybody was like off Tebow during that era, and Harvin was still like my favorite player to watch on that team.
Harvin
He
was because
was
I mean,
dirty. He was so
the way he
dirty.
could just run circles around anybody he was matched up against was really impressive.
Oh yeah,
A lot of SEC guys are like that, though. When you think about it,
really, yeah.
it
Because I mean, that's the SEC has always been stereotypically known as like the best NFL developing conference.
but there are dudes like, and there are guys, like No Sean Moreno, another one who was like a running back who
I
was
forgot about him till you said that. Yes,
incredibly good at the college level, incredibly electric, gets to the NFL, finds himself in a great position with those Denver teams, But it's once again, it's just not the same, I guess.
Mhm. That reminds me, I cannot tell you how while we're talking about highlight tapes, I cannot tell you how many times I watched that play specifically where he's running down the sideline, just leaps over the pylon, one hands
Yeah,
this thing and hits into the
yeah.
carpet. Bro, that is one of the sickest
That's
plays
one of
I've
the most
seen.
badass things I've ever seen to this day. Yeah.
Yes, no Sean was that dude at Georgia, and now he's like a long line of great Georgia running backs that and he's the forgotten name because then you got the guys
Yeah.
like Todd Gurley and Nick Chubb who have panned out from the Georgia backfield, and he's just kind of forgotten because he didn't have the career anything close to what he had at Georgia.
Well, even when you think about Todd Gurley, he had what, like a 4-year span of being the best running back before it was over.
Right, well, I think
Running
injuries
backs
played
are
a
just
role.
so hard.
Injuries,
Yeah,
yeah, injuries played a role with that because like when he was healthy, he was one of the
he was
best of the
God.
best.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Once again, another example of the St. Louis Rams having like incredible amounts of talent that just somehow falls apart just when you need it not to fall apart or you're moving to Los Angeles.
Yeah, it seemed like and is it just me or does it seem like Gurley's injuries really started, like, picking up right during the move to Los Angeles?
And they really did, and it was like,
It that may not be factual, but it does feel like that.
that's just what it felt like. I mean, they still had Aaron Donald, but he hadn't become Aaron Donald, the greatest defensive tackle of my lifetime yet. We were still a couple years off from that.
I will say greatest defensive tackle of all time. I went there.
I could see an argument for that. Definitely, yeah. It's just thinking about who plays defensive tackle too, because some people switch positions.
I just would argue that there wasn't another defensive tackle that disrupted both the running game and the passing game the way Aaron Donald did, who also, while since we're a college podcast, was a stud at Pittsburgh as well. And he was one of those guys that I saw play in college and made me look really good. Like, yo, and when he got drafted by the Rams out of Pittsburgh, I was like, that's a great pick.
No,
He's gonna be amazing.
the wildest thing about Pittsburgh too, like the college Pittsburgh, is that how
Yes.
many like every like 5 years or so, they have a player come through who's like a bona fide Hall of Fame guy to the point where they have like 12 dudes in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and it's like
Right.
Dan Marino, Tony
Larry
Dorsett,
Fitz Larry
Larry Fitz,
Fitzgerald.
LaShawn McCoy probably going to end up there. Uh,
Mhm.
who's the other one? Crap.
That
There's
reminds
another
me, while you're thinking of that,
Charlie
that
Sanders.
reminds me of a debate I saw on social media a while ago. This is a while ago, going back a few years, because I thought it was so one-sided, but, like, then when I actually ran the numbers, it really wasn't, and it was who
Hmm.
is the better running back, and, of course, as Colts fans, I know who you and I wanna say. It was Edgerrin James or LaShawn McCoy, and, of course, as Colts fans, we wanna say Edgerrin James, but who was a great running back at Miami, by the way, because I know we're a college podcast, we don't veer off too far in the NFL. But
It's a bye
anyways,
week.
it's a bye week, right? But like as Colts fans, I wanted to say Edgerrin James. When I actually looked at the numbers, I was like, oh, I'm not so sure. Because like,
Oh
I mean,
yeah.
it's not. I mean, well, at least it's not one sided as I thought.
And what made Shady unique too is the fact he came along at the perfect point where people were just starting to figure out you could also do some nifty passes to the running back too, and playing with the quarterbacks he did, who were probably a little bit more mobile than our beloved Peyton Manning. Let's not be delusional.
Hey, no, well, no, I'm not delusional there. Peyton Manning was a statue in the pocket, but well, no, also Edgerrin James was a great receiving threat too. I mean, he
He
before
was.
like Brandon Stokely really came onto the scene, like he was our third leading receiver for a lot of years. I mean, especially when you have a team like, Marvin Harrison on one side and Reggie Wayne on the other.
And Austin Collie getting another concussion in the middle. Oh, sorry.
Austin Collie has a
That
concussion
poor,
while we've been on this podcast.
that poor guy, man.
That yeah, poor guy.
I'm trying to figure out like where I know that Mike McCoy after that like 6 year stint in Philadelphia bounced around a bit. I completely forgot he was on the Bills for 4 years. I remember the Kansas City and Tampa Bay stops because he ended up winning 2 Super Bowls,
Right.
which good for him. That's ring culture isn't as bad in the NFL as it is in like the NBA discussions, but
Oh
still,
no.
it
No.
always helps to have a Super Bowl championship if you're trying to get in the Hall of Fame.
I think ring culture is only is is only equivalent in the NFL as it is the NBA if you're talking about quarterbacks.
Yeah, that's the only thing. That would be the only discussion where people have that. And then you have the whole wins are not a QB stat discussion, which I would argue in college maybe not, but in the pro level, the quarterback's the most important position. But that's a debate for another bye week.
Right. I mean, yeah, because you're in college and you say you have a great quarterback, I know after back when we were social media and sports, I knew I threw a lot of shade at this guy regularly, but um when you're in college and you maybe have a supporting cast equivalent to like Lamar Jackson's at Louisville, I mean, wins are not as equivalent as, say, Baker Mayfield's was at Oklahoma. Because I mean,
Right.
I was watching highlights this week to, I guess get my mind right for the show, and it's amazing to look at the talent on the offensive side of the ball that those Oklahoma teams had, especially during the Mayfield years, because they
Oh yeah.
had yeah, because I mean, they had his first year as a starter for Oklahoma. They had like D.D. Westbrook, who had a great college career, didn't really pan out in the NFL. But he also had Hollywood Brown, and of course, the big one, CeeDee Lamb at receiver. He had several pros on that offensive line, including Orlando Brown, who's one of the better ones in the NFL right now. Mark
Yeah.
Andrews, who is one of the best tight ends in football. Joe Mixon at running back. I mean, just the amount of talent he had on the offensive side of the ball during those years specifically was insane.
Lots of Bengals going on there. Oh man,
Right.
D.D. Westbrook, another guy who I thought was going to do better than he did, and then balled out against the Colts in that epic, epic Carson Wentz collapse game in Week 17 so many years ago.
Uh,
Ugh,
I'd like to forget about that.
I would too, but this is what we get for liking sports. We have to remember it all.
Right.
There is no escape. But yeah, that's totally true because college sports to me too, because of like the transient nature. That's just how it is. They sometimes become a blur to me, and I lose track of like who was there when. And then you saying that, it's like, oh my god, yes, he really did have 3, 4, hell, 5 guys who are still playing in the NFL at a pretty high level on that team. And it's like, there's no way Joe Mixon and Mark Andrews were on the same team. And it's like, oh crap, they were.
One of my favorite things to do is watch old games, and I say old, I mean like my era old. And you just look
Your
back at these
era. That's my
rosters,
era.
our era old, fine.
I
Um,
am not that much old or
okay,
younger than you.
pre Ryan era. How about that?
I like that one. That
The pre Ryan era,
BR before Ryan, BR era.
BR before Ryan. I like it. I would say, but I like to go back and watch those games, and obviously remembering the good games that were played, but also looking at the rosters and just like reminiscing on like where these guys are at now. I remember watching the old Liberty Bowl game that I went to between Boise State and Louisville, and to think that Andy Avalos, who was the then head coach of the Boise State Broncos at the time, was starting linebacker and actually picked off Stephon LaFours and took 92 yards of the house in that game.
That is weird to think about. Where's Stephon LaFour now, I wonder?
That is a great question. I've met Stephon LaFours, and he's actually a really nice guy. Not that that answers your question in any way, but I just wanted to point it out there.
I'm looking it up. You ran for a minute.
Well, I think yeah. So we got like about 5 minutes left, and um I think we should transition more to the basketball side too, because that's just convenient for me because that's where I have in my notes. But no, I think equivalent in basketball to me is some of these guys because we as we established earlier that basketball highlights started at an earlier age. Guys that really panned out or had great highlight tapes at the high school level in basketball that didn't really maybe pan out in the college level. The one that stands out to me is Seventh Woods. I remember when his highlight tape came out, and this dude was a defensive superstar, making just jaw dropping plays on that side of the ball. Freak athlete, could even hit some open shots. And I'm thinking at worst, this guy's going to be first team All ACC defense for however long he's at North Carolina. And then he transfers to 3 schools in 4 years, or 5 years
Yeah.
rather.
Yeah.
Never averages more than 5.4 points a game. And I'm just like, dang, where did it all go wrong for Seventh Woods?
It is true. I mean, there are a lot of basketball. Basketball is even more tragic in a lot of ways because there are just dudes you think that are going to end up having great careers that completely disappear off the face of the earth. And basketball too. it's also still a sport where you have like rumors and legends. Because I remember way back when I was starting to pay attention more to IU basketball, one of the big like recruits of the Tom Crean era was this kid from Colombia named, and you might remember Hanner Mosquera Perea,
Yes, yes.
who was like this big 7 foot guy. And it's like we don't really have any highlight reels of him. And when he hit the court, he was good. He could slam dunk. And then he ended up transferring to East Tennessee University, where he did win a conference championship, but it just wasn't the same. I mean, Duke, you're getting even more higher profile guys. So the shock when a dude doesn't pan out probably hits a lot more
Yeah.
than like Peter Jerkin or Hannah Muscara Perea or Bawa Manubru or Jeremiah Rivers.
Mhm.
I swear those are all real guys. I'm not making them up. So yeah, you're
Yeah.
right. It is, and it is interesting, just like how those hype reels, because that's what it is. It's like watching a movie that's gleaned over and pretty, and you miss like those glaring issues in a guy's game because nobody's got a perfect game. Let's be honest.
No.
There is no game that's 100% perfect, and sometimes those errors are even more covered up because you just like Zion. Like imagine Zion Williamson if all he could do was dunk.
Right.
And all you saw
And
was a dunk. You think he's the greatest ever, but all he
and
could do was
speaking
dunk.
and speaking of Zion, I mean, he had another like legendary mixtape when he was in high school. And of course, the big knock on his mixtape was that he was playing against like JV dudes in South Carolina.
Yeah.
But then like he came to Duke and did basically the same thing. And then when he
Yep.
is healthy, he does basically the same in the NBA. So I mean, I think that's the reverse of what we're talking about is how people thought that he was only a highlight guy. And then when he actually took the big stage, he showed that no, I'm a complete player here. I'm not just, a YouTube guy.
Yep. And he's really the biggest example of a guy that I could think that did that. And now, the questions about his pro career, the way Stephen A. Smith comes at him every
I stopped
weekday
paying
morning.
attention to him a long time ago. Him and
Oh, you
Skip
love
both.
but now Skip doesn't have a job anymore, so I don't know what he's
No, I
up to.
know.
But
I did hear that. Oh, I think he's fine. He's been on television for 20 years. He don't need to work
he
another
just
event in
needs
his
to
life.
stay off the weed, and he's gonna be okay.
I don't even think that's weed. I think that's bath salts at that point.
That is true. Well, we're approaching the end, lesson. Before you get to your spiel, I think one thing is obvious. You and I are very excited for football, and this is the last Saturday in a long time where we will not have college football on our television. So we have that to look forward to. So we don't have to do any more filler episodes. But Les, it's time for the rundown. Let the people know where they can find us and complain.
As always, like and subscribe to the Less is More Sports YouTube and Spotify channels. Be sure to follow our social media pages on Facebook, Twitter, and Threads. That's at Less is More Sports. If you like little side quests that I do, you can also follow the TikTok page as at BeansDad018. And yes, absolutely, football's almost back. And one thing that even Ryan suggested we bring to the show is that we even do week by week predictions of the big games that are going on in college football. So you definitely want to stay tuned for that. So we hope you enjoyed another episode of Less is More Sports podcast. And until next time, what are we going to
There,
ramble about?
I don't know. There will be headgear though if we do what Ryan suggested. I will bring headgear involved into this.
Call me Les Corso.
Less Corso. Less is more so.